You think you're sleeping, but your soul is watching. Every night, when the world turns silent and your body drifts into stillness, something stirs beyond the veil. Eyes closed, heartbeat slow, and yet you're not alone. Because what lies beneath sleep is not emptiness, but entry. Entry into a realm older than your name, a space where time unwinds, and the soul remembers what the mind has forgotten. Edgar Cayce, the man many called the sleeping prophet, once said, "Each and every soul leaves the body as it rests in sleep. But no, each soul must find its way back to its God." That was reading 278. What Cayce hinted at, again and again, was simple and terrifying. That while your body rests, your soul travels. Where does it go? To places that don't follow our rules. To encounters that seem like dreams, but are far more deliberate. To lessons, warnings, glimpses of something your conscious mind isn't ready to accept. Not yet. Cayce wasn't speaking in symbols. He was precise. In reading 900 to 241, he described how the soul moves beyond the physical shell during sleep, engaging with higher realms, to learn, prepare, and remember. In his words, the body, in sleep, receives impressions, just as the soul body does in the intervals between earthly lives. That statement alone should rattle the foundation of what we believe about sleep. Because according to Cayce, what we experience every night is a microcosm of death, and what we return with is more than just random dreams. He spoke often of the Akashic Records, what he called God's Book of Remembrance, a kind of spiritual database containing every thought, deed, intention, and experience of every soul. In reading 2533:8, he described it this way: "Those made by the individual. The record is God's book of remembrance." While asleep, Cayce taught, the soul reviews this book. Like an artist stepping back from a canvas, the soul examines what it has painted and what still remains undone. But this was never meant for wide audiences. Not all of it. In private readings, Cayce described something most people don't know. Visions too vast, too revealing, sometimes even destabilizing. Some souls, he warned, return from sleep confused, troubled. Not because they saw something evil, but because they glimpsed truths too large to integrate all at once. They saw past and future bleed into each other. They saw events that had not yet occurred, but were likely to. In reading 136:33, he said, "In sleep, the soul may wander far, and yet bring back a shadow of what was seen. Not a clear photograph, not a script, a shadow, symbols, fragments, riddles, the kind of thing we call dreams. But what if those symbols weren't arbitrary? What if they were messages, coded, cloaked, but meant for you? What if that dream you had, where a long-gone relative appeared in a glowing room and told you to forgive before it's too late, wasn't just subconscious noise? What if it was your soul returning with a whisper of truth, hoping you'd listen before waking made you forget? The idea may be overwhelming, but Cayce was clear. This is normal. This is natural. And it is happening to you. In reading 304-5, he warned, "We have conditions that might have been, that are, and that may be. Do not get the three mixed up." Sleep reveals them all. What could have been, what is still possible, and what is. The soul sees the intersections of destiny and decision and offers you a thread. But you must choose whether to pull it. So why don't we remember? Because remembrance is earned, not forced. The soul might witness a field of symbols, a silent ocean, a child staring through a cracked door, a burning tree that regrows its leaves overnight. To the soul, these images are clear, but by the time you awaken, they become fragments, mist evaporating in the light. Cayce said this forgetting is a mercy, but sometimes the message still leaks through. Sometimes, the symbols won't fade. And when they don't, something changes. You begin to feel that your dreams aren't dreams, that someone was there, that you were somewhere, not metaphorically, not psychologically, literally. One woman, decades ago, walked into her kitchen at dawn, trembling. She had awoken from a dream, or what she believed was one. In the dream, she was standing at the edge of a lake. The water was still, the moon hung low. A man appeared, one she had never seen in her waking life, and placed something in her hands, an envelope, but no name. He whispered, "You already know who it's for." She jolted awake. Hours later, she received a call. Her estranged sister had collapsed from a sudden stroke. The last words that sister said before losing consciousness, "I forgive her." This is where the veil begins to tear. You see, the soul doesn't wait for the body's permission to do its work, and what it sees can change the course of your waking life forever. Not every dream is a vision. Not every symbol is a sign, but some are. And when they are, they carry more power than any waking moment could offer. You may never be able to prove it. You may never tell anyone, but you'll feel it. That something happened while you were asleep. Something real. Something sacred. And that part of you, the part that matters most, was wide awake. And perhaps you felt it too. That one dream you can't forget. The one that clung to your chest long after sunrise. Maybe it was never meant to be forgotten. Let's take the story of Rachel. She was 35, divorced, raising 2 kids in a sleepy town on the Oregon coast where the rain felt like a second skin. Life had gone quiet. Not peaceful, but heavy, like a paused song. On the surface, Rachel had rebuilt everything. The house, the job, the routines. But inside, there was something cracked and jagged. And it had a name. Elise. Her sister. Her first best friend. Her first betrayal. 7 years earlier, Elise had crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. Rachel's marriage had been dying already. Quiet arguments, cold dinners, unspoken resentment. But Elise had been the one to twist the knife. She hadn't just comforted Rachel's husband. She'd taken him. Rachel didn't explode. She evaporated. She cut off contact, changed her number, blocked emails, ghosted holidays. When Elise sent a letter, handwritten, desperate, Rachel read only the first 2 lines before tearing it in half. That door was closed, cemented shut. Forgiveness wasn't on the table. Not now. Not ever. But some truths don't die. They wait. It began, as these things often do, with a dream. Rachel found herself in a long corridor. Not a house, not a hospital, somewhere else. The walls shimmered like old film, and the air felt dense. Not heavy, but full. Lined along the corridor were paintings, framed in gold, pulsing gently. Each one was a memory. She walked past images of herself, birthdays, arguments, forgotten places. Then one painting caught her breath. It was her and Elise, sitting beneath the old plum tree in their childhood backyard, barefoot, sunburnt, laughing. Rachel stepped closer. The painting rippled. A soft voice came, not from behind or above, but from within. "This isn't how it was meant to end." She turned. No one there, just a warm breeze brushing past her shoulder. Then, darkness. Rachel woke with a gasp, heart pounding. She didn't tell anyone, just shook it off, drank her coffee, packed the lunches, drove to work. Dreams are just noise, she told herself, leftover brain static. Nothing more. But that night, it returned. This time, she stood in a garden, surreal and quiet. The sky was lavender. Trees swayed without wind. There was a stone bench under a weeping willow, and sitting on it was Elise. Not as she looked before the fallout. younger, softer. The version of her Rachel remembered from when they still braided each other's hair and made fairy potions in mason jars. Rachel walked forward, not breathing. Elise looked up. Her face held guilt, regret, but something else too, hope. "I made a terrible mistake," she said softly, "but I never stopped loving you." Rachel tried to speak. She wanted to scream, to cry, to collapse, but she couldn't. Her voice didn't work here. Elise reached out, touched her hand and whispered, "Don't wait too long." Then she vanished. Rachel sat upright in bed, shaking. She didn't sleep again that night. Days passed. She tried to forget, but Elise had slipped through the cracks of her mind. Memories surged. Shared birthdays, broken dolls, the hospital when their mother broke her hip. Everything they had once been, everything she had sealed away. She opened the junk drawer in her kitchen and found the old photograph, the one she couldn't bring herself to throw away. They were kids, smiling, Rachel with missing teeth, Elise with dandelions in her hair. The next day, Rachel searched her name online. Elise wasn't active. No new posts. Just an old photo from 2 years ago. A charity walk. A pink ribbon on her shirt. Rachel's stomach flipped. She called her mother, first time in months. "Mom," she said, voice catching. "Do you know if Elise is okay?" Silence. Then, "She didn't want you to know, but she's in hospice." Rachel drove 5 hours the next morning. She didn't pack, didn't call ahead, just left. She didn't know what she'd say, if Elise would even want to see her. All she knew was the dreams weren't just dreams. They were calls. The hospice smelled like lavender and antiseptic. Room 214. Elise lay there, frail, bald, sunken. But those eyes, her soft, steady eyes, were the same. She looked up and froze. "Rachel," she whispered, voice thin and cracked. "You came?" Rachel nodded. Her eyes filled. "I thought you hated me." "I did," Rachel said. "But something showed me. You didn't stop loving me, even when I did." They didn't talk about the betrayal much. They didn't need to. Over the next 3 days, they laughed about childhood things. They cried about their mother's old cherry pie recipe. They held hands. They sat in silence. And on the 4th day, Elise slipped away, peacefully, quietly, like a leaf falling. Rachel stayed in the room long after the nurses left. She stared out the window. Sunlight spilled onto the white sheets. There was no thunderclap of forgiveness, no divine vision, but something inside her shifted. A soft exhale, like the soul had unknotted itself. Weeks later, Rachel had the dream one last time. She was back in the hallway. The same paintings, only now, the one of her and Elise, the plum tree one, was glowing. This time they were holding hands. And in her chest, she felt it. Not a message, not a warning, but a release. When she woke, she whispered 2 words into the stillness. "Thank you." She didn't know to whom, but somehow she knew they heard. What happened to Rachel was not coincidence. According to Edgar Cayce, the soul is not confined to the body, nor to the hours we are awake. In reading 136-33, Cayce spoke of the soul's activity during rest. In sleep, the soul seeks its source, and it meets with others, not always in body, but in essence, to complete what the conscious mind leaves undone. Rachel's dreams were not simply expressions of regret. They were meetings, real intentional encounters on the soul level. In Cayce's vision, these nighttime visits are part of the spiritual house cleaning the soul must perform to restore harmony. In 57:53:1, he revealed, "Forgiveness is not of the mind alone. It must be established in the soul, and oft it is through dream that the soul reaches out to be reconciled. In that luminous garden, when Rachel saw Elise as she once was, innocent, untouched by time, she was not recalling the past. She was witnessing the soul's truth as it exists outside of pain, regret, or betrayal. Time, as we know it, collapses in dreams. In 294 to 185, Cayce stated, "Time is an illusion to the soul. In dreams, the past and future are but rooms of the same house." It was Elise's soul reaching out to Rachel, not just for closure, but for completion. According to Cayce, relationships carry karmic threads across lifetimes. Some entangle, some liberate, and the soul in sleep tries to weave them back into alignment. Perhaps Elise had seen her own death approaching and had begun this soul work in her final days. Or perhaps Rachel's buried grief had finally opened a doorway for resolution. Either way, it was in the dream world that their reconciliation began, and in waking life, where it was fulfilled. This is the mystical brilliance of Cayce's vision, that sleep is not escape, it is initiation. A sacred passage where forgiveness becomes possible, not as a mental exercise but as a soul agreement. In 262-9, Cayce reminded us, "Dreams are the spirit speaking to the flesh. Hearken, if you would remember what thy soul already knows." Rachel remembered. That's why she drove 5 hours without packing a bag, because something older than logic was calling her. And when she arrived, she wasn't just saying goodbye. She was saying yes, to healing, to release, to the quiet miracle of redemption. So the next time you wake with a dream still burning behind your eyes, pause, breathe, and ask, was someone trying to reach me? Because in the unseen hours, the soul remembers. But Rachel wasn't the only one guided by the invisible thread of the soul's memory. Some stories don't begin with a dream, some begin with silence. Let me tell you about Michael, a 42-year-old paramedic living in rural New Hampshire. He was known in his town, calm under pressure, kind, never one to lose control. People called him the Rock, and for the most part, he lived up to that. But inside, Michael was unraveling. It started with something small, a long shift where he snapped at a colleague, a panic attack while driving, a sleepless night that turned into 4. He chalked it up to burnout. Normal, he told himself. But there was something deeper. Each night when Michael closed his eyes, he'd find himself in the same place, a dim corridor lined with doors. Behind one door, always the same, a faint sound of weeping. But no matter how many times he tried to open it, he never could. At first he ignored the dreams. Then he started waking in cold sweats, heart racing, filled with dread he couldn't explain. He stopped sleeping. He withdrew. His partner Erin noticed, but when she asked, he just said, "I'm tired. Work's been rough." Then one night, Michael finally opened the door. It was vivid, real, more real than anything he'd ever felt. In the yellow walls, faded blue tiles, a woman with red hair was sitting at a table, sobbing into her hands. There was a child's drawing on the fridge, a mug that said, "World's Best Dad." And suddenly, it hit him like a wave crashing over his chest. He knew her. Her name was Claire. And once, a long time ago, he had loved her. But this didn't make sense. Michael had never known a Claire. Not in this life. Not in any memory he could call his own. The dream ended as quickly as it began. But the ache, it stayed. He started researching past life dreams, soul memories, and inevitably, he stumbled across the work of Edgar Cayce. Cayce had said in reading 57564, that ye meet in the dreams is not fantasy. It is the shadow of a memory that lives beyond the moment. And if you would heal the soul, heed the face that comes again and again. Michael began journaling, meditating. He even tried hypnosis, desperate for clarity. What he found shocked him. Under guided regression, a memory surfaced of being a soldier in the 1940s, a man named John, stationed in England. He had fallen in love with a woman named Claire. They had a son, but he had died in combat, young, without ever saying goodbye. The grief had been unfinished, the love unresolved. Now, decades later, Michael's soul was trying to remember. He became obsessed with the idea, traveled to the UK, looked through archives, scanned war records. He didn't know what he was hoping to find, maybe proof he wasn't crazy. He found a record. John Whitmore, American soldier, died in 1944, survived by a wife, Claire Whitmore, and son Matthew. It was too precise to ignore. Michael sat in that archive building for hours, shaking. Everything inside him was turning upside down. How could a dream, a simple dream, have led him to this? Michael didn't try to find the descendants. He didn't want to intrude, but he visited the town, walked its streets, found the tiny home where Claire had once lived. It was still there, run down, empty. He stood outside the rusted gate for a long time, and then a quiet peace fell over him, like something that had been locked away had finally breathed again. That night, he dreamt of her once more, but this time, she wasn't crying. She was standing in the kitchen, sunlight on her face, holding the drawing in her hands. She smiled, looked at him, and simply said, "You remembered." He woke with tears streaming down his face. Michael's panic attack stopped. The dreams faded, not disappeared, but softened. He told Erin everything, and for the first time in years he felt real, not like a man surviving, but a soul living. Cayce's work gives language to these kinds of moments, moments the modern world often dismisses as fantasy. But for Cayce, these are not delusions. They are visitations. He wrote, "Those who appear in dreams, especially with emotion, are oft not imagined. They are souls ye have known, and shall know again." Michael's journey is not about proving reincarnation. It's about remembering love and healing pain that logic can't access. It reminds us that grief doesn't end with a funeral, and love doesn't begin with a name. These truths, Cayce insisted, live in the soul, and the soul does not forget. When Michael returned home, he planted a tree in his backyard, a cherry blossom, just like the one outside Claire's old home. And every spring, when the petals fall like snow, he sits beneath it and thanks her, not because he regrets, but because he remembers, because somewhere in a deeper layer of being, the kind we only reach in sleep, in silence, or through sudden awakening, Claire waited. There is a silence that follows remembrance, not the silence of emptiness, but the silence of knowing. When we peel back the layers of noise, the duties, the headlines, the algorithms, what's left is something ancient, a hum beneath thought, a vibration of presence. That's where the soul waits. Both Rachel and Michael were pulled into that hum. Neither asked for it. Neither could explain it. But something greater than logic stirred within them, a memory not bound by birth, a truth unshaped by belief. And in that stirring, something healed. Edgar Cayce devoted his life to helping people remember, not just their past lives, but their sacred nature. He insisted, often gently, sometimes urgently, that we are more than flesh, more than careers, more than failures or victories. In reading 2067-1, he offered this quiet truth. Know that the soul has not beginning nor ending. It is of the Creator. Its destiny is to know itself as one with the source from which it came. That destiny is not fulfilled in a flash of enlightenment or a grand awakening on a mountaintop. Sometimes it begins with a trembling hand reaching for a journal. Sometimes it starts with a question whispered in the dark. Why do I feel this pain? And sometimes a name surfaces, a place, a dream. A door finally opens. Cayce did not promise comfort. He promised meaning. He spoke of karma not as punishment, but as balance. He spoke of dreams not as fantasy, but as fragments of our wider story. He reminded us that our greatest wounds are often keys, not because suffering is noble, but because within pain hides the longing for reunion with our own soul, with those we've loved, with the source itself. If you felt it, that unnameable ache, that strange remembering, that flash of grief or joy at a dream you can't explain, you are not lost. You are awakening. There are others walking beside you, some visible, some unseen, some that return only in dreams, not as ghosts, but as echoes of love waiting to be completed. So take a breath, close your eyes. Listen to who you were, to who you are, to who you are still becoming. If this journey stirred something in you, we invite you to stay close. Here at House of Spirique, we explore the forgotten, the mystical, and the eternal. Subscribe if you feel called, and remember, your soul is ancient, and it remembers far more than you think.